So shalom, Andreas, and thank you for being with us today.
Shalom.
We know your perspective is so valuable to so many people. So when PISA was envisioned, the world saw a technology revolution coming with computers and then the internet and the social mobile cloud transformation. All of them brought the world to the palm of our hands. And the understanding was that human skills must upgrade, that computers would be able to calculate better and quicker, and that now people need to be able to apply, to solve, to innovate. And this is why the PISA framework was created. So now when you look back 25 years at the first quarter of the 21st century, looking through the lenses of PISA and your numerous encounters with education systems around the world, what's your insight about this heroic effort of humanity through education to upgrade and to ride the wave? Have we been successful?
It's difficult to say. I mean, the one thing that is quite clear is what was a novel, if not revolutionary idea in PISA, namely to shift away from testing what students know to looking at what they can do with what they know, is now commonplace. I think that technology has made it abundantly clear that the kind of things that are easy to teach and test are now very easy to digitize and automate. So PISA's approach to look at the process of learning, the capacity of young people to extrapolate from what they know, apply their knowledge creatively in novel settings, I think has been very important. But now I think is almost, the world demands a lot more than that. And I think PISA needs to evolve to its next stage from that as well. The area, in hindsight, I would probably have put greater emphasis is the kind of social and emotional outcomes. Can you live with yourself? Can you live and walk with people who are different from you? Can you live with this planet, reconcile the present with the future better than we did in the past? I think those issues have emerged recently, and we probably have not paid as much attention to this as we should have 20 years ago. Now we do. Now PISA is putting a lot of emphasis on that, but clearly that's something that we missed. The other part, what we call global competency. Can you see the world through different lenses, perspectives, appreciate different ways of thinking, understand different cultures now? We incorporated that in PISA in 2018, but we could not get a lot of countries actually committing to that. Surprisingly, while everybody, did the PISA mathematics assessment, we had only about half of OECD countries embracing that notion of global competences. And perhaps, we should have worked harder to make sure that this is not seen as peripheral, but really as a center of PISA.
And now as you look ahead towards the second quarter of the 21st century, there's a new technology wave coming with big data, machine learning, artificial intelligence. How do you see future of human skills develop? How should education systems change and upgrade, and how could PISA help the world of education evolve by showing the way towards the future?
Good point. And actually, I must say on this, we have prepared ourselves since a number of years already. What surprised the world, ChatGPT, is what we had factored in actually since, the middle of the 2010s. In 15, 16, we started to work on those areas. But I think there are several things that emerge. First of all, foundation skills will remain important. The fact that, ChatGPT might think critically doesn't mean that humans should do less of that. And that, technology might, even develop, creative solutions doesn't mean that humans need to be less creative. So I think this foundation skills will remain incredibly important. But what is quite clear is that we need to evolve the notion of those foundation skills as well. Literacy is no longer about extracting knowledge. It's about constructing knowledge. Can you navigate ambiguity? Can you manage complexity? Can you see issues from different sides? Literacy now is about constructing knowledge. Can you distinguish fact from opinion? And I must say, our education systems fail us on this. When we saw in 2018 that only half of 15-year-olds in OECD countries can distinguish fact from opinion. We got surprised. But then when you think what we do in education, I'm a scientist by background, and in a lot of classrooms, I see how we teach science like religion. We make people believe in some scientific theory, we give them lots of exercises to practice it, and then we test whether they remember the answer. It's nothing to do with scientific inquiry. Science is always about questioning the knowledge of our times, not reproducing it. And I think that's the evolution that PISA needs to make, have task formats, assessment formats that actually foster that sense of inquiry. Our new assessment of creative thinking was a good example of that, where your students had to create their own ideas, develop multiple solutions, assess the originality of their approaches. Now, that was really very important. I would also think, the development of our new assessment of AI media literacy. To what extent, can you, again, manage complex information structures? Find, have a strong foundations for that, I think, is very, very important. So that's kind of AI capabilities in the digital world. And again, I don't mean technological capabilities. I think students will figure all of that out. It's more the conceptual, the ideas that underpin that are very important. But, I would go one step further. If I think about the future of PISA, of assessment, I think we have to bridge that divide between assessment and learning. I would actually say one of the biggest problems that we created in education was to divorce learning from assessment. And it's a fairly recent phenomenon. If you go back in time, we all learned through apprenticeship. We learned with and from people, and this kind of tutoring was very natural to learning. And then we separated the two. We made people pile up, lots of learning, and then we brought them back and one day and said, tell me everything that you learned in a very contrived, constrained setting. We called that an exam. And that divorce of learning from assessment has created many of the problems that we see today. And I think looking to the future of PISA, I'd like to see the learning and assessment process more integrated. In 25, next year, we'll have an interesting component in PISA where we actually look at how students solve problems rather than just whether they get it correct. So we very much look at the learning process. We don't give them test questions. We give them, learning tasks where they need to engage with, and struggle with. And we look at actually how they address this. I think those kinds of things will become increasingly important. But I want to come back also to this question of social and emotional skills, ethical reasoning. Can you distinguish good and bad and right and wrong, which, AI cannot. AI, the one thing that distinguishes us from computers is our capacity to make the judgment. We have, I think, to focus our assessments on what makes us human, and how we complement, not substitute, the artificial intelligence in our computers. So social and emotional skills, ethical reason, our sense of beauty, to see the world, their kind of artistic aspect. I think all of those things are ones that I think need to become a priority and fast. I think we cannot put this off for another decade. We need to find answers to this very quickly if we want that it changes our education system and advances them.
And looking at Israel, that's our local perspective. We're a tiny country with probably huge opportunities and obstacles. And we perceive ourselves as a startup nation, which is highly exposed to technological changes, but also a very fragmented society with, as you know, immense gaps that are unfortunately aligned along gender, ethnic, and economic lines. And of course, now a country that is traumatized by a dreadful war. So what would be your recommendations for Israel's education in the coming decade, looking at our own perspective?
The startup nation, that is your great kind of potential and what you bring to the world. But I must say, actually, at least when it comes to PISA, we see quite little of that in the classrooms of Israel. You have a small share of young people who do amazing things, and you change the world, not just Israel. But if I look at the majority of young people in Israeli classrooms, they're still very much focused on very traditional learning, content reproduction. And I can say that because students in Israel are relatively good in reproducing subject matter content, but actually do have difficulty applying it creatively, using it creatively, extrapolating from what they know. So I think that very foundation is still very important, to get towards an instructional environment that is more problem-based, that is more project-oriented. In a way, that in Israel comes later, when people do military service or other things, that brings in that aspect. But, you would want to see much of this earlier. The other part is, the more we can do to build bridging social capital. We are all born with bonding social capital. We are close to people who think like us, who look like us, who work like us, who come from the same tradition, our family, and actually that is easy for humans. That's how we were born. But to build bridging social capital, and actually I would say this is for many countries a huge kind of challenge. The growing polarization that we see, not just economically, socially, culturally, in almost any dimension. It's very much, I think, reflected in our human capacities to see. And technology is just massively amplifying that. Technology, can, amplify your own ways of looking at the world and insulate you from divergent perspectives. So I think education needs to redouble its effort to build that kind of bridging social capital through which we can extend our radius of trust to people who are different from us, to strangers, to institutions. And I think that is a huge, huge challenge, I think, for Israel, and I think for many countries these days. Unfortunately, the world and technology push us in the opposite direction. But education is the only opportunity that we have. It's the first time that you leave your family and enter into a space where you encounter people from different kind of spheres, and we should look at that in a more active phase.
Finally, we are recording this interview towards a big gathering of Israeli educators in Tel Aviv. What would be your message to our audience?
Yeah, I think the role of educators is just fundamentally shifting. In the past, educators were mainly instructors. Now, the idea was to transmit, what we knew from the past to the generation of the future. But today, teachers need to be the future today. They want to see their students tomorrow. And I think that is just an incredible tension. The environment around them is inherently conservative. As parents, we get very anxious when our children no longer learn what was important for us. Or when they do learn things that we no longer understand. As a teacher, you're much more inclined to teach how you were taught than how you were taught to teach. As a policymaker, you can lose an election over education when something goes wrong, but you're not going to win an election. So I think for educators at the front line, it's very, very difficult to live the future today in an environment that is still the past. And I think the biggest challenge is that educators need to find more space, not just to be good instructors, to become good coaches, good mentors, good facilitators, good evaluators, creative designers of innovative learning environments. Data scientists, you can read the signal, from, artificial intelligence and new learning kind of programs. I think it's hugely challenging for educators, but personally, I think, it's also going to make the profession much more attractive, intellectually attractive. I know, there is still a lot of work to be done in Israel to make teaching financially more attractive. I agree with all of that, but I think the bigger challenge is to make teaching, intellectually more engaging, more attractive, to make teachers really the architects of the future of the country. And I think that is a huge opportunity that we never had in the past. And I think technology is the big enabler, but I do think, it's the people in the front line that will build the education system, not alone, but in a collaborative culture. That is perhaps the last message I have, that, as a medical doctor, you would not design your own medicine. You do that together as a profession. And I think, again, the question of what should we learn? How do we aspire educators and young people? The what, the curriculum is about, what you do, and it's about fostering compliance. It's the why that causes inspiration. And so I think conveying that message as an educator to my colleagues, building, a new instructional system in a collaborative culture, taking professional ownership over the agenda. I think those are the big promises in front, but also incredibly tough challenges.
Thank you, Andreas, for these inspiring words and for being with us today. I hope to see you in Israel soon and wish you good health and continued success.
Thanks so much, Eli, and I hope I see you in person soon.